one of your shirts says "Love is the movement," and I know you guys ripped that off of someone else. So tell us that story.
Yeah. Love is the Movement was the title of a Switchfoot song on a record like 3 records ago, so it's, I don't know, it's 5 years old or 6 years old.
Fair game, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, no, so I reached out to those guys and I just said, hey, would it be cool if we borrowed that phrase, and they're on to the next thing, so they're like, oh yeah, we'd be honored, that's totally cool. And so we started printing these shirts and so it's funny, so now some people know it, they think it's ours, and so we have to be honest and say, no, it came from them. But I think the heart of it is this idea that we're really wrestling with, what does this word love mean? Like, you hear it a million times a day, what does it mean? And so I think really looking at, and then people will use the word movement, which I think it's a big word. Like, people are quick to throw that around, and I feel like, man, that's a big thing. Like, if something's really a movement, like that's a big deal. And I love the idea of both of those in one place. And I think so we're trying to figure out, and I think we're just coming to a place of feeling like to love people means we're willing to meet their needs, and we're willing to learn about those needs. We're willing to learn about the places that people live, and so just kind of that whole process. So we like that phrase.
I remember a guy named Jesus talking about that too, so maybe you can tell them that they stole it from him.
Yeah.
And then you guys can be off the hook there. What role does your faith play in what you do?
Yeah, it's a good question.
My other ones haven't been?
No, they're all great. The questions, the water, it's a good night. No, I mean, it's really interesting because for me, I think it's the lens that I see the world through, is this idea of that Christ has changed everything for me, and that I've been invited into a relationship with God, and yet we realize that the language of the things that you and I believe, we feel like it's been abused, and there's people who, like you talked about at the beginning of the service, there's people who are really uncomfortable with the idea of church. They think it's not for them, or maybe they had a bad experience. And so we really felt like we had to choose our battles early on. And so we didn't want to come in under this banner that maybe would push people away, especially with these issues being so sensitive. And so the battle we wanted to put at the top of the list was just meeting people where they are and trying to create something that was inclusive and trying to create something inviting and hopeful. And so we don't call ourselves a Christian organization, and yet there's kind of a tension there because the language of, what I believe is really obvious in the story, and we really believe in honesty, and we really believe in freedom, and I think that even the idea that we can talk about anything, and so I feel free to talk and write about my faith and about Christ, and even in the face of depression, even in my own seasons of depression, like being honest about, hey, this helps me get out of bed in the morning, this helps me make sense of my life, and so it's interesting, and we definitely, there's people that don't get it, and then there's people that really appreciate that. We got a comment like a week or two ago from a Muslim girl who said, I don't believe what you believe, but I feel like there's something true about what you guys are doing, and I think you guys are onto something. And so we feel like it's maybe a patient process. Like we're introducing people to kingdom ideas, and we're just a bit slower to call it the kingdom.
No, that's definitely cool. What organizations do you guys work with and support? You talk about these different amounts of money that you guys are donating. Where does that go, and kind of what are your ties?
There's a few. There's Mercy Ministries and Teen Challenge, both provide residential treatment. There's one called Safe Alternatives that focuses on the treatment of self-injury. There's one that we probably work the closest with right now is called Hope Line, which most people know it as 1-800-SUICIDE, which is just basically a network of crisis hotlines all over the country, so that if anyone anywhere picks up the phone and calls 1-800-SUICIDE, they're routed to a local call center, and they're able to talk to someone who's trained in suicide prevention. And that's been a really cool relationship for us. Those guys, right now, they just have a lot of financial need, and yet they've answered close to 3 million calls in the last 10 years. So, I mean, they're just doing an incredible work. And so we feel like, we're able to kind of lend the surprising stage and the attention that we get. We're able to focus it on them, and even to be able to send them a check every month feels really good. And then we're able to learn a lot. They're in D.C., and so they're able to teach us a lot about why that town is so important and what happens there. And they've just been in the game longer, so they've really become, like, it's been a cool friendship. And then beyond that, we took a trip to India in January of last year and worked with 2 different organizations that work in the realm of human trafficking and fighting the sex trade there. And so we continue to support those guys. And then the one other right now is something called Kids Help, which is 24-hour phone and online counseling in Australia. And basically we started to hear from so many young people there, and we felt like we wanted to do something to invest in solutions there. And then I think next on the list will be something in the UK.
That's very cool. Well, let's make this a little more personal. The people here, let's say someone is right in the middle, of a battle with depression or suicide or cutting or any of these things. A lot of times I think the fear is that there's no hope or it's not worth fighting. What would you want to say to that person and just, really personal?
Yeah, I think like I've heard it said that hope begins with this idea that we believe that we're not alone. We talk so much about community, and we think community is this really beautiful, true idea that we were not meant to do life alone, like that we were made to do life with other people. And so we think those things are huge for everyone in the room, no matter where you're at, no matter what you're going through. And I think just to believe that, I think we can confidently say that you are not alone, and then beyond that there's solutions that exist. We're so grateful that God has given us wisdom, that God has given us medicine, God has given us people who now have been educated and have given their lives to being part of these solutions, and so there's a tremendous amount of hope that exists in the face of these issues. And I think the reason for the texting and the things you've seen on the screen is just to remind you that for some reason the tendency with these issues is to feel and assume as if, I'm the only one in the room. I must be the only person who feels this way, the only person who's living with these things, carrying these things, and the reality is just that it's not true. And I think even in that, there's a hope in that, in this idea that there's people that can relate to me, and I think we need to know that we're not alone. And even this idea in this setting of the body of Christ, what is it, like, what an honor that Jesus would call us to help be a part of the process of meeting needs in the lives of our friends and the people that we care about. And so we think it starts there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I know just for me, just hearing your story and seeing what you guys are doing, it just inspires something in me to go, hey, what am I working on? What am I tackling? What am I letting God kind of, tell this story? And so what would you want to say if someone's out there going, man, that is so cool to hear how you guys have responded to this, but, the world is filled with all sorts of problems, and many of us are here because we know these problems, and many of us are trying to do something about that. What kind of advice do you have when you look at the problem and you go, what do I do about it,
Yeah. I think people ask us a lot. They say, hey, how do I start something big? And I think what they're getting at is that they assume that this thing, To Write Love in Arms, has become something big in their eyes, And I think the answer surprises them, because I basically say, I don't know, And I think the reality is we try to do something small. Like, we tried to help one person and we tried to tell one story. And I don't know, so I think we just encourage people to start there. And I think we live in a unique day, like, when there's a bit of a fascination and a trend around all these nonprofits and grassroots movements and all these things. And I think if we're not careful, like, we can get lost in the hype. It maybe sounds funny coming from me, because we're one of those that are a good example of that. I think just the reality that, man, what are the needs that break your heart? What are the things that move you? What are the things that matter to you? I gave a couple examples last night, like, there's young people that are going to go back to school in a couple weeks. Like, does it bother you that there's people that will eat lunch alone? Like, is that a need that deserves our attention? Like, we would say yes. I think just that if we begin to wrestle and to move for those small things, like, I think then I can't help but guess that God's gonna bless those and be creative and work and allow some things to grow and surprise us. And so we just think, man, what does it look like to dream in the face of these things that are painful? What does it look like to be creative in being a part of the solution?